Hello and welcome to All Villa No Filler podcast, all about Aston Villa, the world's greatest football team. Unai Emery's mighty side didn't play this weekend, but there was still plenty of action in the transfer window this week. We'll talk all about the links from this week, and later Frankie has one of his tongue-tickling, spicy questions for me. But first things first, Frankie, how are you?
Are you looking forward to a tongue-tickling, spicy question, George?
I always am, Frankie. Every time I know that one's coming up, I feel, I start to sort of salivate at the back of my throat just thinking about the spicy question to come.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued. It's like if someone, a waiter gives you a menu and you look through and you go, surprise me and hand it back. That's what it feels like. It's going to be one big surprise for me.
They just bring out pork scratchings.
Yeah,
Just,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, doing all right. The storm has arrived where I am.
Yeah.
Storm, whatever it's called. I can't follow the names now. But yeah, so the windows are rattling. The gods have arrived and they are reminding us of their mighty presence here. Kind of like when Aston Villa play and we remind our opponents of our great presence. Storm
Absolutely.
Villa has arrived. So yeah, but unfortunately no Storm Villa this weekend. I always feel a bit of a loss when Villa don't play. It's a bit I'm glad they're not playing because I am glad they're getting a bit of a break.
Yeah.
They've played a lot of games recently, quite high impact, high emotional, high intensity games. So it's nice
I
to
think,
kind of
yeah, I think the break is, sometimes we talk about, is a break good for some clubs, bad for some clubs? I think for us at this stage, I think it's really good, isn't it? Because I think we were looking a little bit jaded over Christmas, weren't we?
Mm.
In terms of performances and a couple of results, which were slightly disappointing. But yeah, I've noticed all the players on their Instagram pages have flown off to, all parts of the world to
Dubai.
Dubai. Yeah, basically, yeah.
Dubai's the most footballer place in the world, isn't it? It just screams footballer.
Yeah, it does, and they're all there. Aside from Dougie, I think, who's in Portugal.
Okay.
I guess as a Portuguese speaker, that seems to be a sensible place
Yeah.
to go. Yeah, he's not with Alicia Lehman, of course. His
No.
on again, off again girlfriend. I mean, that's keeping me interested, Frankie.
Yeah.
While Villa have been on a bit of a sabbatical.
I do like to check in every now and again, see how they're getting on.
Yeah, yeah, it does bring a smile to my face when I see them, together on Instagram, or at least on Instagram. I just assume they live their lives on Instagram, very much
Yeah.
like us.
Yeah.
You
We don't
know,
have quite as many followers. I think Alicia's got something like 20 million followers.
we get,
We're closing
Frankie, we
in.
get, we get. She's looking behind her back right now, thinking, "Oh, I've got to watch out for Frankie
Yeah.
Maguire."
Frankie's just hit 420. He's on
Yeah,
his
but
way.
it's only going one way, Frankie.
Well,
The only
George,
way's up.
just you. I'm going to get down the gym, get beach body ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what everyone does on Instagram, isn't it? If you go on anywhere on Instagram, any location, particularly beaches, and just click on like a hashtag of like a location, you go, oh, I want to see what this looks like. Maybe there'll be pretty photos of the location,
Yeah.
some ideas about restaurants to go to. All it is just influencer after influencer after influencer. I click on Cardiff and I just see pictures of you posing everywhere.
On Cardiff Bay Barrage.
Yeah.
Just tops off, six pack out.
Staring off glumly into the distance.
Frankie,
Aston Villa have just had a loss.
if you've got it, flaunt it. That's what I say.
Yeah. And
I've got it in spades.
yeah, exactly. I don't have any of it. So
Well, listen, I'll send you my routine.
yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I need to become an influencer. I'm using you to
Yeah.
piggyback my own career as an influencer and TikToker.
Yeah.
So yeah, stay tuned for that. But while
Yeah.
I'm here, I suppose I might as well talk about Aston Villa with you.
Oh yeah.
As you said, no Villa game this week, but plenty to talk about in the transfer market. And
Mm.
let's go through some names that we've been hearing in the press and on social media over the last few days. Three in particular sort of seem to be doing the rounds in particular. And they seem to be following a similar theme, which we'll obviously touch on in a moment. So they are Costa. These are ones I'm going to get the names wrong.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck with these.
Kosta Nedeljkovic, the
Yeah.
Serbian right back from I'm going to call them Red Star Belgrade.
Yeah.
Morgan Rogers from Middlesbrough, and Hákon Rafn Valdimarsson, the goalkeeper from Elfsborg in Sweden. He's an Icelandic international.
Mm.
And one thing that stands out about all of them, Frankie, is they are all very young, which marks a bit of a change really from how we've seen
Mm.
arrivals at Villa Park over the last few years, particularly under Steven Gerrard, who actually made a point of raising the squad's age. It
Yeah.
seems like Monchi and Emery are quite keen at reducing it.
Yeah, and I personally kind of agree with it, really. I think there has to be a healthy mix of the two. You can't just keep blowing all your money on players who are in the autumn of their career. Now, I give Perzo a lot of credit for, various different things. And I think the academy was like one of his great innovations when he came into the club. One of the first things we did, whether he sort of lifted the template from Chelsea and Man City, whatever, at least he did it. And we sort of reaped the dividends from that, and we continue to, hopefully, for years to come. But I did think in the late Perslow Gerrard era, I know Danny Ings was before Gerrard, but when I think of like the likes of Danny Ings, Coutinho, Diego Carlos, Luca Dean, all of these players were signed for close to 30 million, pretty much, apart from Coutinho, who was 17 million. All of them on big wages, over 100 grand a week. I think at one point, Danny Ings was our highest paid player, 125k a week, and that was what was reported. And he, came in quite confusing circumstances. Turned up on the day Grealish left, and came in when we already had Ollie Watkins operating in his position already. And it was a question, could the two play together? That we it was a question we created, and we never needed an answer to it, really. We never needed to create that question. But the point is that it felt like we were buying a lot of players that were a bit older and putting them on long contracts, and players that, to be quite frank, were not going to make enough of a differential to the team to get us into Europe and the Champions League. And in particular, Steven Gerrard was never going to do that anyway. Whereas actually the players that have kind of driven us forward are players that largely were bought not for big fees, really.
Yeah.
You could say Leon Bailey was, the way he's played this season. I think he was about 30 million from Leverkusen. But generally, our key players have been, Boubacar Kamara, Emi Martinez, 15 million, Douglas Luiz, John McGinn, Ollie Watkins,
Ezri Konsa.
Ezri Konsa. That's kind of the spine of the team. Jacob Ramsey, academy player, Alex Moreno, Pau Torres was a bit more money, so I think it's important to have players who have experience, but at the same time, prioritizing younger signings who are a bit lower risk, particularly in this environment with FFP, where things are, let's face it, a lot of clubs now are quite tight. Forest and Everton have paid the price for that. And Everton paid the price for signing a lot of players in the autumn of their career who were on big contracts and they couldn't shift them. That's a mistake that a lot of clubs have made over the years. So you have to have a healthy mix of the two, I think, because you do need experience as well as youth. And Newcastle at the moment struggling to buy players and will likely have to sell one of their big guns, Guimaraes or whoever. And when it comes to Villa, this is kind of Monchi's MO. It's Monchi in action. You look back on his past at Sevilla. Think back on players like Dani Alves, for instance, who he brought in, from Brazil when he was very, very, young, early 20s, ended up being one of the greatest right backs in world football history. Unfortunately, he's got horrendous controversy around him at the moment, so that overshadows his career. But as a player, what Monchi found in him, it was kind of indicative of what Monchi's approach is. Rakitic, another player he found for quite cheap, came in and ended up becoming one of the best midfielders in world football in the last 10 years. Jesus Navas, Sergio Ramos, players who came through the academy at Sevilla. So, I'm glad to see Villa are focusing on finding some of the best young talents they can find, bringing them in. And if two of them don't work, well, it's not that big a loss. Whereas if Danny Ings doesn't work or Coutinho doesn't work, that's a lot of money you're spending and you're stuck with big contracts. Whereas if one of these players, let's say Nedeljkovic or Nedeljkovic, whatever it is correctly pronounced, if he ends up being a 30, 40, 50 million pound fullback, well, there you go. If one of them works out, perfect. So, I'm quite excited by it, and particularly in this environment of FFP where, let's face it, Villa probably are quite tight, given all the signings we've made over the years. Every club's now going to have to do outgoings and be mindful of it. So I think that future-proofing yourself in this way is probably quite a wise way to go.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think we've certainly seen in the time that Emery's been at Villa as well that he is in the business of improving players. Um, so that bodes well for these players who potentially could be on Villa's books in the next couple of weeks or so. As you were saying, they're very young, they're potentially quite raw. Um, but as you've seen, Emery working wonders with the players already under his disposal, at his disposal. He has the managerial and the coaching nous to get the best out of them, give them the confidence to play. And yeah, I mean these are very intriguing signings.
Yeah.
I think sometimes if you sign players like Coutinho or like Digne, I know Digne's found a bit of form in recent weeks, but for a long time he was struggling, um, and yeah, as a fan that's frustrating, isn't it? Because you know that they've been brought in for a lot of money, they've been brought in on big wages, and so the expectation on the players from the fans is quite fierce. It's quite strong, isn't it? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure on them to succeed. And you talk about, what is their motivation? Are they here for the money? Do they feel that they've done it already? Again, if we talk about Coutinho, he's played for clubs like Liverpool and Barcelona. Was he ever really in a position? And he had, injury and form problems for much of his career towards the sort of the tail end of it. Obviously, by the time he arrived at Villa, they're all kind of like, big red flags, aren't they? Okay, as a name, it's impressive,
Yeah.
but in terms of
Probably
what he
helps us
can,
marketing wise. Yeah.
yeah, and marketing wise, sure, there are a couple of benefits, but fundamentally, what he can do on the pitch didn't seem to live up to the sort of the name of Felipe Coutinho. Whereas some of the players that we've been linked with, they're not going to arrive. If they do arrive, they're not going to arrive costing us too much money in either transfer fee or wages,
Mm.
and they've got a lot to prove. I mean, if you talk about one of the best players we've signed in the last, God, 50 years, it's John McGinn, who came for
Yeah.
2.5 million from Hibs when we were a championship club, and he is now one of the first names on the team sheet and our captain.
Mm.
So if he's anything to go by, then and he's improved under Emery. So if he's anything to go by, and Emery's man management skills is anything to go by, then I've got real hopes that if any of these players or any ones we haven't named come into the club in the next couple of weeks or week or so, then they're coming to the right place to improve. I mean, if you talk about some of these players individually,
Mhm.
so Nedeljkovic is, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about him. I do remember watching the Champions League game between Red Star and Man City, where he put in a very strong performance. As again, he's only 18, so teenager playing against world class opposition, and he more than held his own.
Mm.
I think he's played for Serbia up until under 19 level. He's yet to make his senior debut, but I'm sure that's on the horizon. And that's the one where really, although there's been no official announcement, that is the one where we're expecting that to be confirmed in the next sort of few
Yeah.
hours or couple of days. I mean, we had a lot of notorious football journalists saying that the deal has been completed. So we're just waiting for the announcement, and the idea is that he'll go back on loan to Red Star until the end of the season and arrive in the summer. And he is a right back. That's a
Yeah.
position we've talked about a lot over the last few weeks as an area that needs strengthening. Okay, it's not going to be strengthened before the summer, but certainly that's an area that we've already strengthened in ahead of the next season. So it's acting quickly, it's acting decisively, which is always good to see. Yeah, what sort of intrigues you about that signing, Frankie?
Yeah. You know, firstly, I've watched YouTube clips of him, and I can tell you officially that Novak Djokovic is now just the third greatest Serbian sportsman of all time. Nedeljkovic goes in at second, Savo Milosevic first, obviously. So that's the first confirmation I can make. Djokovic just looks at him in awe. But yeah, I mean, look, if you're 18 years of age and you're already starting for, the top team in Serbia in Red Star Belgrade, and you've got Champions League experience. That immediately puts you on the radar of a lot of clubs around Europe. You're definitely going to be watched. And so the fact that Monchi and Unai Emery have watched various tapes of him, looked at his underlying stats, the scouting department and Aston Villa have seen something there, fills me with a lot of confidence that there must be something that's telling them that there is something to work with here with this guy. Now, obviously, at that age, once he comes into England and the Premier League, it's obviously not going to be an easy transition for him because the Premier League is different. Serbian football, obviously, at the age of 18, it's brutal. It's hard. I mean, men's football at professional level is always difficult when you're that young. But coming to Premier League obviously is a different experience. So we're going to have to see how he adapts to that, and also a whole new culture, new climate. Just everything about playing here is going to be a different experience for him. So how he adapts to that. But I'm sure Aston Villa will do everything they can to help him in that regard. But if you look at transfer market, their expert Alexander Milic has described him as a player of great potential. Said he played regularly in the Champions League only at the age of 17 and was one of the best in Red Star's team. He has enormous potential as a physical athlete. His acceleration is extremely impressive for a player his size. Has great pace without the ball and likes to play physically with plenty of contact. So that already, that sort of a description sounds very Premier League, doesn't it? And he can run repeatedly at high intensity for 90 minutes as well. He's a solid crosser of the ball, both from set plays and running positions. So all of those descriptions from a Serbian football expert, that's a positive sign, I would say. And so if it doesn't work out, we haven't spent that much, so we're not really, doesn't feel like we're losing out too much. But if it does work out, well, that's a brilliant signing that hopefully for years to come will turn out to be a very, very fruitful one. And reading that's and seeing some of the clips I've seen him in, particularly in the Champions League highlights, you can see there's something there with him, and he'll just continue to physically grow. And I'm sure, hopefully, within the next 2 to 3 years, he'll look like a very, very solid Premier League player and one that has a high ceiling. So, yeah, I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Do you have any concern that, over recent weeks we've heard about, John Duran being unsettled? He's a man of similar age coming to the UK as a young man, from Colombia. And as we don't know the whole truth of it, but certainly what we've been hearing is he is quite unsettled, and certainly you'd think his age and his background has got something to do with that, which is perhaps inevitable. Is there a fear that with us targeting young players who aren't familiar with not just the league in England, but the culture, the language, is there a concern that we could have another situation like that on the cards?
I think it's always an individual case, isn't it? I think Aston Villa, as a professional Premier League football club, will do everything they absolutely can to help, young players coming over to adapt and to sort of just get used to how things are, and obviously help them with, translation and learning English and all that kind of stuff. So that Villa will have everything in place to help everyone as much as they can. Obviously, then it's just how there's things outside the club's control. They can't control everything, and so some individuals maybe will be able to cope with it, and some maybe just it isn't for them. And with Yon Duran, it's an interesting one because it feels just a bit like you get the sense there's a sense that he desperately wants to play all the time, and maybe that we don't know the ins and outs of what exactly has gone on with him. There's clearly some kind of unsettling, and John Percy in the Telegraph's reported it as well, so that's a very legitimate source. And you hear these links with AC Milan. West Ham have made a loan bid for him, so there's clearly some sense within football that is there to be got. I personally hope we stick with him till the end of the season. I think he should stick with Villa because I think he's learning under he's having one of the best coaching experiences he'll ever have in his life, and just be patient. Ollie Watkins is the real deal right now, and with Yon Duran, it's probably is just partly youthful impatience, just wanting everything now. And he has real raw talent, and probably just feels that he can only reach the level he wants to reach if he's playing regularly 90 minutes of football. And at the moment, we can't offer that. So I can understand from his perspective if he wants to go, but I think different players will react differently, and I think there might be other young players who come in and sort of realise that I can't start straight away, and maybe I'm just going to have to wait my turn, and when it comes, take the opportunity. So
Yeah, and Duran is another sort of person to watch in this transfer window, isn't he? As you know, we've
Yeah,
seen links with Chelsea, links with West Ham today as well. So we'll see how that develops towards the end of the month.
yeah.
So from Serbia to a player who is much more familiar with football on these shores, Morgan Rogers. For
Mm,
someone who's only 21, he's got a fair amount of experience in the English Football League.
yeah.
He started off as a junior at West Brom, boo, born in Halesowen, so a West Midlands lad, and then he joined Man City's infamous academy. Hasn't or didn't make an appearance for them, but was sent out on loan first to Lincoln City, then to Bournemouth when they were in the Championship,
Yeah.
then on to Blackpool, and then signed permanently from Man City only last summer, joining Middlesbrough in July. So
Mm,
he's racked up a fair amount of games for someone so young at a decent level. Um, again, as I say, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about him. I don't know too much in terms of what he can bring, but he seems to be someone that Villa are really, really keen on
yeah, it
signing. We've heard
does.
reports that, we've had a couple of bids rejected. We seem to be going back in for him. That seems to be in the pipeline, doesn't it, at this
Mm.
at this stage? But why do you think Emery is so interested in Rodgers? What do you think he could offer
Mm.
either this season or certainly in seasons to come?
Yeah, Hales, Owens, own Morgan Rogers. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I say, like I mentioned with the underlying stats, if you look at his stats this season, 26 games in the championship, 2 goals, 6 assists. It's not like tearing up trees. In the EFL Cup, which Middlesbrough in the semi-finals of, he's got played 5 games, 4 goals, 3 assists. So overall, 32 games, 6 goals, 9 assists. 9 assists is good. That's good. 6 goals is all right. Age 21. I mean, those figures are okay actually, but but it's not screaming out at you like this player is gonna. You've got to get him in now. But like I say, with underlying stats, there will be something that Unai Emery, Monchi, scouting department are seeing something that is telling them this guy could burst out at some point, and if you give him a platform to play with better players at a higher level in the Premier League, he might just go even higher than these sort of black and white stats of goals and assists are suggesting. Maybe there's other things he does in the final third. Maybe there's certain movements he maybe there's certain passes he makes that don't come up on the general stats you see that are telling them this guy's got something, a high ceiling. And with Emery himself, he had the eye test. He saw him play against Aston Villa for Middlesbrough in the FA Cup the other week, and clearly Emery saw something that he really liked in that game. So that all of those factors to me, again, excite me because it's like, all right, well, what is it that Monchi and Emery and all the others are seeing that's telling them this guy is someone that Emery is very, very keen to get in? He generally plays on the left. So if you think about it this season, Jacob Ramsey's been injured pretty much all season, and he generally is the one who occupies that left-hand forward position in midfield. This season, we've had to put John McGinn out there quite a bit. I don't think McGinn's strongest position is on the left. I think he's better on the right. Tielemans has gone out there a bit as well. And again, I think Tielemans' best position is kind of where McGinn plays on the right, or as the second striker competing with Diaby. He can also sit in the Douglas Luiz role. But I feel like on the left is where there's not a great deal of competition. So I imagine Rodgers could come in again, a relatively inexpensive fee. I've seen reports that Middlesbrough want 10 million. So we've obviously gone in a bit lower than that. Somebody who's come in for 10 million, again, with a player that they see as potentially having potential to work on, that Emery likes to do that. He's a manager who's always created a nurturing environment, someone who works with players and helps them reach levels that perhaps they themselves didn't realise they could reach, as he's done with all the Villa players since he joined the club. So maybe Rodgers could come in as somebody who could compete with Ramsey in that role, that on the left-hand side. That's probably somewhere where I think he's identified that we need more depth. So, which is interesting because right back is where you'd say we need more depth. Hence why we've been linked to this right back. And on the left-hand side with Ramsey is somewhere you'd like another player, I think, to compete. I was hoping Philogene would do that this season, but obviously he wanted to play a bit more than we could offer, so off he went to Hull. But with Morgan Rogers, like I say, this is one that I think, again, be excited about. Like, as I say, he's not a player that immediately strikes you as looking at those numbers and thinking, oh my God, we have to have him at Aston Villa right now. But there's clearly something Emery has seen in this player that he likes and thinks I can help him go to another level.
You know what, as well, what this sort of like makes me think, and maybe I'm being a bit too optimistic here, but it sounds like this is all feeding into the thoughts that Unai Emery sees Villa as as a long-term project.
Yeah, that's
As
true.
in,
Yeah.
he's targeting these younger players, or him and Monchi are targeting these younger players because they believe that they are the people who can, over the course of a couple of seasons, turn them into, very good Premier League players.
Yeah.
So hopefully that is what does come to pass. Because yeah, I mean, what I would say is, as a fan, it's much more exciting to develop players at a club than it is to sign someone who's been proven elsewhere, I would say. I appreciate, Rodgers has had a really good season with Middlesbrough. He's had a few games at different clubs on loan in the Championship and in League One.
Yeah.
But if he makes his mark, if Villa is the team that he makes his mark in the Premier League at, then that would be amazing. And we've seen, clubs like West Ham, they signed Jared Bowen from Hull City,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and they've turned him into a very, very good Premier League forward. So,
Yeah.
If that's something that we can potentially do with Rodgers or any other of the young players that we're linked with, then that would be something that we would be that would be a very satisfying thing
Yeah,
to watch
exactly. Yeah.
as a Villa fan. And then, yeah, let's move on to the final name that we mentioned there, Hákon Rafn Valdimarsson.
Yeah.
He's 22 years old. He's a goalkeeper. Again, another position goalkeeper that we've mentioned before, like right back, as an area that we need to strengthen. And in the last week or so, we've loaned Philip Marshall, who's been on the bench and actually made an appearance in the Conference League for us away at Mostar. We've loaned him out to MK Dons. We seem to have a decent relationship with them. We sent out Louis Barry to MK Dons as well, didn't we, for a time? So he's gone there. So a space has emerged in the goalkeeping department. There have been question marks as well about Robin Olsen's form and fitness as well. He has a number of caps for Iceland, even at his young age, and seems to have been making a really good impression in the Swedish top flight with Elfsborg. Again, not that I watch Swedish football, Frankie. I'm sure you're not as in tune as in with it either, but again, it's someone who it would be an intriguing signing. It's someone that if we do bring him in, that he's certainly one to follow and can grow at Villa.
We actually have a lot of listeners from Scandinavia. Sweden, we get quite a few. Norway, I know. So hello to everybody in Scandinavia who is listening, and please do help us with the pronunciation of Hákon Valdimarsson's name.
And if you know anything about him, if you're an Elfsborg fan or you've seen him play this season, just if you get in touch, let us know your thoughts about him, because he's a name that's very much under the radar as far as we're concerned. So let us know how he's been playing.
Yeah, because again, another exciting one. Only 2 million, I think, or 1.7 million pounds is the fee that apparently we've offered. And again, this is, in footballing terms, that is, you're not going to really make a loss on that unless he turns out to be absolutely useless. So you'd like to think with our scouting department we would find a player who is not totally useless. And you look at him, he's 14 clean sheets in 29 league appearances last year. He was got goalkeeper of the year in Sweden. So that's for a 22-year-old, that's an impressive start to your career. I've watched some videos of him, and you can't really go off a few YouTube videos or whatever. But one thing that is noticeable is his shot stopping and reaction times are very impressive. Like he's a very, very good shot stopper. Obviously, Villa, we like to play out from the back, as do a lot of football teams now. So that would be an adaptation for him if Elfsborg haven't really played that style before. That's something that he would have to sort of come in and get used to. But no, I mean, signing a 22-year-old goalkeeper of the year from Sweden to me, I think is for a relatively cheap fee. I think that's quite again another one that I'm quite intrigued by. And like I say, who knows what sort of level he could get to? He might turn out to be an absolutely brilliant signing, and one day he goes for 30 million, and there you go. Huge profits. So, that's the way to look at it, I think.
Would he be the second Icelandic player since Berke Bjarnason? Have we signed any other Icelandic players?
Joey Gudjonsson.
Oh, Joe Gudjonsson, that's right.
So Iceland has a population of 370,000 or thereabouts, right?
Mm.
Are they the most incredibly, freakishly incredible sports people on the planet or something? Because their football team, I remember 20 years ago, Iceland's football team was not, they were regularly, a team you'd play and you'd see them lose generally. But in the last 10 years, what they have done is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Drawing with Argentina in a World Cup, beat England and knock them out of Euro 2016.
Yeah.
Get to the quarterfinals of Euro 2016. Regularly qualify for Euros tournaments and World Cups. Like the things that country have been doing is just off the scale.
Yeah, it is remarkable. It is incredible. I mean, I don't know. There must be quite a strong culture for sports there. Yeah, as you say, with the population so small, to have that many professional sportsmen. I mean, just be men and women beyond football as well. You know, to be a nation that competes in, I suppose, a number of. I guess you think they'd be fairly strong in Winter Olympics. Yeah. But yeah, it's a fascinating country, isn't it? Yeah. So hopefully,
always great in Eurovision as well. Always
great in Eurovision. Always one to tune in for. But also the fact he's been playing in Sweden, maybe that will be quite good in terms of, him sort of learning under Robin Olsen.
I think this might be a replacement of Robin Olsen. I think if I was to be
probably a
honest about it.
But yeah, I mean, if he arrives and Olsen is still there, maybe he can sort of, go under his wing as two, fellow Nordic individuals.
Again, it's another example of an area where you'd look at Villa and think, where could they improve? Backup goalkeeper for Emi Martinez is a very, very explicit and obvious position that you go.
Of course, yeah.
That's where if we lose Martinez for games on end, we just cannot replace him.
Valdimarsson, in you come, pal. Straight in from Elfsborg to ceiling Champions League football at Villa Park. Imagine.
Yeah. But do you think this do you think the way Villa are going at the moment, do you think that's represents, do you wish Villa were making big signings this January so that we could push on for the Champions League and for the league title? Is there any part of you that regrets Villa haven't done that, or do you think it might be FFP reasons? What?
I mean, I think it's a combination of things, really. Villa are fundamentally they are a work in progress. What we've achieved so far this season, I think, is even beyond Emery's wildest expectations. He is still tweaking the squad. There are players I'm sure that he would like to move on. There are players, more high caliber players he'd probably like to bring in. But I think he's probably looked at the depth of the squad and looked at our youth teams or our younger players and thought the ones that we've got at that sort of level probably aren't going to cut it. At least for him, and we're seeing players, as I say, like Marshall go out on loan. Could that be an indication that he doesn't see him as, a young goalkeeper that's got potential at that level, whereas Valdimarsson would come in, take that Marshall spot, and be an upgrade on him. Do you know what I mean? So at every sort of level at the club, we're looking to improve on the players that are at that current level. So, I don't imagine Rodgers, he will start every game for us, but there'll be a youth player who we've currently got, a Villa Parker out on loan, who he'll have to move on. Could Rodgers be the replacement to Finn Azaz, who we've
Yeah.
sold to Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, the players that we're letting go at the moment need replacing, but they need to be improved upon.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably what is going on at the moment. Obviously, with ideally in a best case scenario, you want all of these players to come in and play first team football. I mean, that would be amazing. But you're looking at them and you Elfsborg for £1.5 million. The likelihood is that they're not going to be starting week in, week out currently,
Mm.
but they're going to be working with top professionals at the club, with top coaches,
Yeah.
with the idea that in the long term, over the next 5, 6 years, they might have a couple of loans out, but they'll come back and they'll be fighting for that sort of that number one spot.
Mm.
And it's just all good for competition. It's
Yeah.
good at creating a different atmosphere at the club. And it just further cements, Emery's stamp at Villa. As you say, a lot of the players, they've done very well, but a lot of the players that are at Villa at the moment aren't his players. He didn't sign them. He's improved them, and I'm sure he wants to keep a lot of them on. And they've sort of almost he's adopted them as his players,
Mm.
but they're not his. And I wonder where what we're seeing now is, he's going to be imprinting his mentality, his philosophy on a younger crop of players who are performing well at their own clubs, but he can work with and mold with and turn them
Mm.
into Unai Emery, Aston Villa players of the future. That's the way I see it happening.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of points actually where I don't think it means that Villa won't make big signings this summer.
No.
Like a Moussa Diaby and Pau Torres were brought in last summer. But I think what might happen is we might make a big sale or two this summer.
Yeah, I
More
agree.
on that in the second half. And I don't. I'm not saying I want Villa to lose big talents, but let's face it, if someone comes in with a massive £100 million bid, again, like the way FFP works, the way football works, sometimes you have to make these sales. All clubs make big sales. Man City make big sales. Everyone does it. And at some point, we're going to have to do it. And it's how you replace them. And hopefully, we're future-proofed ourselves and can use some of that money to, let's say we wanted to get a 26-year-old, 27-year-old from Real Sociedad who could come in and slot into midfield and be a playmaker there. We may have to spend, something like 50 million for it. And I think Villa would do that if we had the funds in place. So I think this focus on youth is not necessarily a sign that we won't ever make big signings again. I think it's just it's a more balanced approach, a healthier approach long term, hopefully. And also, it's worth remembering, I've listened to quite a few podcasts about European football. I listen, I watch European football a fair bit. And something that I've picked up on is that Villarreal, Emery's most recent team, are struggling, and Sevilla have struggled in recent years. Monchi's most recent team, and part of the reason that both teams have struggled is because they failed to replace aging players quick enough, and the focus was for both sides a bit too much on aging players. So
Yeah.
now they're lumbered with these contracts and these players that they simply cannot get rid of, who are hamstringing them financially. And they can't, instead in the past, what both of those sides used to do was bring in young players, build them, sell them on, and those players would also get them into the Europa League, Champions League, whatever, and just be improved on and all that. And I do wonder if Monchi and Unai Emery have seen kind of what's happening at their most recent clubs that they left in the last 2 years, and know that that cannot be repeated at Aston Villa. So that's something worth bearing in mind as well, I think.
Yeah, it all seems like a sensible approach. And fundamentally, every summer we can't be, as you said, we can't be signing £50 million, 4, 5, £50 million players. It's just not feasible.
Without a
It's not going to
sale,
work.
yeah,
Without a sale.
yeah.
And even then with a sale, I'm not entirely sure that that's a wise place to go. I think what you want to do is sign a couple of, seasoned, experienced, talented players, and then bring in, 3 or 4 players like a Morgan Rogers or whatever who can kind of learn alongside them, play with them.
Mm.
Okay, maybe not every game, and maybe it might be a case where they go out on loan, or it might be a case that they don't work at all and we have to cut our losses. But yeah, you need to have that balance, because as you say, if you sign experienced players for lots of money on big wages, then you'll end up, as you say, like an Everton or like a Sevilla or Villarreal overseas, and be struggling with a difficult kind of long-term strategy. So
Mm.
yeah, it sounds very sensible, and yeah, I'm all for it.